In 2020, the restoration of one of the most important masterpieces of Western art came to light, and the reaction was immediate. The newly revealed face looked like a mix between a cartoon and an unsettling stare that no one expected to find in a 15th century painting. It went viral within hours, and this wasn't just any painting. We're talking about the Ghent Altarpiece, a sacred work that had survived wars, theft, and centuries of history, until a restoration came along that, for many, ruined everything. But what if I told you that the part everyone found so disturbing was actually what the artist originally painted? In this video, we're going to uncover what really happened, how a well-intentioned restoration turned into one of the biggest controversies in the art world, and, most importantly, what this tells us about how we look at works from the past. Because maybe the problem wasn't the restoration, but what we expected to see. To begin, we need to understand the painting we're talking about. This masterpiece is so massive, it feels like an altar in itself, made up of 12 panels that open like a sacred book. Every part is packed with tiny details, radiant figures, impossible landscapes, and symbolism everywhere. That's the Ghent Altarpiece. It was completed in 1432 and is considered one of the first great works of the Northern Renaissance. It was painted by the brothers Huber and Jan van Eyck, although, fairly speaking, most of the credit goes to Jan. Huber likely designed the overall structure, and Jan brought it to perfection. And yes, it's the same Van Eyck family that revolutionized the oil painting. Before them, artists mostly worked with tempera or fresco. After them, everything changed. Today, this artwork remains in the place where it was originally conceived, St. Bavo's Cathedral in the Belgian city of Ghent, not in a museum under bulletproof glass, but in an active church where it still holds spiritual significance. And why is it so important? Well, for many reasons. First, the technique. Van Eyck achieved a level of detail that simply hadn't been seen before. Fabrics, metallic reflections, human skin, everything looked real. So real, in fact, that for centuries people believed he must have used some kind of optical trick. Second, the use of light and color. At a time when painting was still mostly symbolic rather than naturalistic, he painted how light bounced off surfaces, sunbeams pouring through a window, the gleam on armor, the dampness of the landscape, things others hadn't yet figured out how to portray. And third, its theological composition. The altarpiece isn't just visually stunning, it's deeply meaningful. Each panel tells part of a greater story, the redemption of humanity through the sacrifice of Christ, represented by the mystic lamb. Everything in this work is designed to move you, whether you're a believer or not. So when we say that a restoration touched this painting, we're not talking about just any artwork. We're talking about one of the most influential pieces in Western art. Quite literally, a cornerstone of modern painting. And now, let's step into the painting itself. Because the Ghent Altarpiece isn't just a single image, it's two completely different experiences. One when it's closed, and another when it's opened. And I promise you, the contrast is striking. When it's closed, we see four figures at the top. Two Old Testament prophets, Zechariah and Micah, and two sibyls, pagan women who, according to tradition, also foretold the coming of Christ. We know who they are because their names are carved into the bottom edge of each panel. Just below them, across four panels, is the Annunciation. On one side, the Archangel Gabriel, on the other, the Virgin Mary with a white dove above her representing the Holy Spirit. They're inside a Flemish home with wooden furniture, cloths, a picture, details that seem pulled from real life. The scene is full of symbolism, the closed room, the open book, the still atmosphere, but that deserves a whole video of its own. On the lower register, we find the donors who commissioned the piece, Jus Weid and his wife Elizabeth Borluut. They're kneeling in prayer, and beside them are their patron saints, John the Baptist and John the Evangelist. These saints are painted in grisaille in a style that mimics sculpted marble. It's as if they're guarding the threshold to something far greater, because when the altarpiece opens, everything changes. The scene transforms into a luminous cosmic vision bursting with detail. On the upper interior level, at the center, sits a majestic figure, God the Father, or Christ in majesty, depending on interpretation, enthroned, wearing a triple crown and papal robes. To his left is the Virgin Mary, to his right, John the Baptist. Together they form what's known as a deesis, a traditional image where Christ serves as the judge, flanked by intercessors pleading for humanity. Flanking them are choirs of angels. Some are singing, others play musical instruments like lutes and organs, but they're not there for decoration. These angels form a divine concert, rendered with such precision it almost feels three-dimensional. At the far edges of this upper row, we see Adam and Eve, completely nude, each in their own panel. They're portrayed with such raw physical realism that it's hard to forget this painting once hung in a church. They are a constant reminder of original sin, and the reason we need redemption, and that redemption takes place just below. At the center of the lower register is the most important scene of the altarpiece, the adoration of the mystic lamb. In the heart of the landscape, a white lamb stands atop an altar. Blood flows from its chest into a golden chalice. Above it hovers a dove, the Holy Spirit, and the light radiating from this moment turns the entire scene into a cosmic mass. It's not a sorrowful sacrifice, it's an act of glory. Surrounding the lamb, pilgrims arrive from every direction. There are martyrs holding palms, virgins, prophets, apostles, popes, hermits, knights, even pagan figures like philosophers and judges representing the righteous from the non-Christian world. It's as if all of humanity, past, present, and future, has gathered to witness this event. In the background, a radiant city gleams between green hills. It is the New Jerusalem, symbol of paradise. In front of it, a fountain spills clear water, and inscribed above it are the words, Hic est fons aquae vitae. This is the fountain of living water. Every corner of the altarpiece has something to say. There is no character placed there by chance. Everything has a purpose, a message, a meaning. And at the very center of it all, that lamb, alive, looking straight at you. And that was precisely the heart of the restoration controversy we're about to discuss. But before we dive into the most controversial part of this story, let me remind you that you can now have this painting in your home. This one, and over 600 other masterpieces from art history, are available right now on our website. Shipping is free worldwide, and by purchasing from our store, you're not only collecting a piece of art for life, you're also directly supporting this channel so we can keep making more videos like this one. I'll leave the link in the description. Now then, let's continue. In 2020, the world turned its eyes back to the Ghent Altarpiece, not because of a new exhibition or a theft, as has happened before, but because of a restoration that promised to return the work to the state originally conceived by the Van Eyck brothers in the 15th century. The project was led by Belgium's Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage. It was an extremely delicate intervention, not only because the painting is enormous with over 20 panels, but because it was covered in centuries worth of varnish, repainting, and touch-ups. The goal was clear: to reveal the original version, to show what Van Eyck actually painted, not what later artists added in attempts to correct or protect the work. To do this, they used the best modern technology available: X-rays, infrared light, multispectral scans, and an extremely precise chemical cleaning. Every layer was documented, every line was compared against historical records and high-resolution imaging. And what did they find? A true hidden layer, literally. They discovered that several parts of the painting had been repainted during the 16th and 17th centuries. Some of these changes were minor aesthetic tweaks, others were complete reinterpretations. Among them, the most significant, the face of the lamb. That face, seen and accepted by generations, wasn't the original. It was covering another face, painted by Van Eyck himself, and that original would spark one of the most intense reactions the art world has seen in decades. For centuries, the central lamb in the scene had a serene expression. Its gaze was slightly averted. It had a calm, symbolic appearance, just as one might expect in a religious painting. But when the restorers removed the upper layers, another face emerged. This one had large, round, human-like eyes, its pupils wide open, staring straight at the viewer. The snout was shorter, the ears were in a different position, the expression was much more frontal, almost unsettling, and social media wasted no time reacting. The image went viral. Some compared it to the infamous Exe Homo of Borja, others nicknamed it the humanoid lamb. There were jokes, outrage, but above all confusion. How could they have given such a strange face to such a sacred figure? But here's the twist, that new face wasn't new at all. It was the original face, painted by Jan van Eyck in 1432, covered up roughly a century later. At some point in the 16th century, someone, likely with the intention of protecting or adjusting the image, repainted the lamb's face, completely altering it. In fact, if you look at the pre-restoration version closely, you can see the lamb appeared to have 4 ears, 2 from the retouching and 2 from the original layer that perfectly matched Van Eyck's hidden face. So what the restorers did wasn't to invent anything. They revealed what had always been there, and that changes everything, because it forces us to ask, do we want to see art as it was originally created, even if it makes us uncomfortable? Or do we prefer the softened, altered version we've grown used to over time? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.